Hey, another edition of Howling with the Wolfe. I'm outside on my balcony today. Got about an hour and a half of practice, so just kind of wanted to chat with you guys. Rough week for the Titans, right? Marcus' injury is obviously one of the bigger storylines. How do you give up 57 points to the Texans is another. And bringing in Brandon Weeden. Those are all kind of buzz-worthy things that kind of happened this week. So we'll chat about those. You guys kind of know the deal by now. Just fire your questions anytime, and we'll go ahead and answer them. I got one question from a Facebook user before I came on, and we'll start with that. Brandon Weeden. The question comes up, why Brandon Weeden and why not Colin Kaepernick? My opinion is Colin Kaepernick is the best available quarterback if that needed to play, if they needed one to play. And I think that, you can have your different arguments on his political views and his stance, but I do believe he's the most talented. I think he's more talented than Brandon Weeden. I think the Titans' decision to go with Brandon Weeden really shows that, one, it's not serious for Marcus. May just be a 1 week deal, or it might not be any week deal. And two, they felt like this was sort of a decision to make it clear, sort of a business decision. We take a guy who is a journeyman. We don't want him to play, but he's a guy who can come in and be a guy who has NFL experience, has played before, but is truly a backup and doesn't bring everything that Kaepernick would bring with his signing. Whether right or wrong, there would be discussion about Kaepernick in a huge way, from national media, from local media. It would be a big thing. You can't just sweep that under the rug. So I'm sure that went into consideration as well. So here we have Brandon Weeden, and as Titan fans, I guess you better hope he doesn't have to play. Let's see what we got here. Fire LeBeau. I feel like that's probably a sentiment from a lot of Titans fans this week. Rough game for Dick LeBeau and that defensive unit. It really was. They didn't play well at all. I wrote a story earlier today on the Titans site, if you want to check it out, about their defensive struggles, particularly in the secondary, and what went wrong, how they're not living up to expectations, and really what's the next step from there. And I think when you look at a situation, and the biggest flaw, in my opinion, was the fact that they didn't have really an answer for Logan Ryan. For DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. It just seemed like their game plan was bad, and they never really adjusted. That will be something they need to figure out. LeBeau has a wealth of experience. I think it's kind of a little jumping to conclusions to tell a guy that he's gone after a rough week, but it is a cause for concern. Appreciate that. I think they've got to fix that secondary. You're not going to be able to go far if you even make the playoffs if teams are just going to be able to torch you like that, especially a rookie quarterback. Is Mariota playing on Sunday? We'll see. We're going to talk to Coach Malarkey after practice. He'll give us a little bit of an update on Marcus. I don't think he'll practice today. I think that was really the word, that he wouldn't practice today, and we would get more information later on in the week. They brought in Weeden, so I guess there's at least a partial concern that they could miss him this week. I think that it's a hamstring. So the thing with the hamstring is that they're tricky. They take time to recover, and you're not really sure when they're going to flare up. So I think it was good news that we got from Mike Malarkey that he was going to be that basically it was similar to DeMarco Murray's injury and not necessarily similar to Corey Davis' injury and Jonathan Cyprien, because they've missed several weeks. So I think that's a sign that he may miss a week, possibly. He may miss none, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a long-term issue. And that's a good sign, because this team isn't going anywhere without Marcus. So I think, if he's a guy where obviously he's a mobile quarterback, but you may see him whenever he comes back, whether this week, next week, he's going to be a little limited in what he can do. You may see a little bit less read option, a little bit less RPO from the Titans offense, and just see him more of a pocket passer. But I think we'd all agree that, 75% Marcus, even as a pocket passer, is better than Matt Castle and Brandon Whedon. So I think that would be the next step, whether it's this week or next week, having a Marcus Mariota just as a pocket passer as he fully recovers from that hamstring injury. It's been longer than just this year. He's been refusing to adjust his defense, the personnel. Take a look at last year and the year before. Last year, I guess, was his first year as full defensive coordinator, where he took over. I know he was on staff in 2015. But they were 30th in pass defense last year. They're 29th this year. You could definitely make the argument that, hey, this pass defense has consistently been a problem and it hasn't got better. That's definitely an argument you can make, and nobody can argue with you. But I think it's a two-part thing. And I talked about this in my article. Is this scheme or is this talent? And you look at it, the last year, I think a big portion of it was talent. They didn't have the talent to consistently compete against the receivers they were playing in their core. They went out and they signed Logan Ryan. They signed Jonathan Cyprien. They drafted Adoree Jackson. They brought these guys in with the hope that, hey, we're going to be able to cover these players. And they haven't got better. So that brings the concern, how much of it is scheme? I think last week a lot of it was scheme. I think that there was no reason why Logan Ryan wasn't covering DeAndre Hopkins. I talked to Malarkey after the game, and his reasoning was they didn't want to switch anything up because it had worked previously. I'm not buying that excuse. This is it's not a reactionary league. You've got to be proactive in your decision making, and you've got a guy in DeAndre Hopkins who's a top 10 NFL receiver. You've got to treat him as such, and they didn't. So that was on the coaching staff. They didn't correct it quick enough, in my opinion, and I think that was a big reason why they lost Sunday. That being said, these guys have got to play better. Adoree Jackson, we knew he was going to be raw coming in, and he has been kind of ate up, particularly last week. He's had his spells, but you kind of expect that with a rookie corner. When they decided they were going to start him, they were basically saying, hey, we're going to take some lumps, but we believe in his long-term ability. So he's going to be a guy that's going to have some up and downs. You're going to have to deal with that. Jonathan Cyprien has missed 3 weeks and is going to be 4 this week with his hamstring injury. So you've got Denoris Searcy that's playing a lot of reps. And Kevin Byard, him and Logan Ryan have probably been the best two in the crop, but, they still haven't played maybe as well as we would initially have thought. So there's a lot of question marks in that secondary, and I'm intrigued to see how they do, and that brings me into your question, Nick. What is your confidence level going right now going into Miami? I think that this is the time their get-right game. Miami has been bad. They gave up 6 points combined in the last 2 games to the Jets and to the Saints. If you can't score against the Jets and the Saints, then you can't score. So this is a chance for the Titans to get right, to really show that, okay, we can adjust. We can look at our struggles last week against Deshaun Watson and correct them and maybe get right against Jay Cutler. And maybe you get a few turnovers. Maybe you get off to a good start. First quarter starts. I wrote about that yesterday. First quarter starts are going to be key on the offensive end and the defensive end. So if you can get those things right, then maybe you're a team that can erase some of those worries from last week and come back and maybe show people, hey, this was just a 1-week deal. We can be better. So what do you think the main struggles for the constant coverage struggles are right now? I think, like I mentioned, I think it's a combination of scheme and talent. I think last week it was the Logan Ryan not covering DeAndre Hopkins thing. That was a big deal. I also think that they got ate up by the play action. I don't know who they thought Lamar Miller was, whether he was Le'Veon Bell or, second coming of Walter Payton. But they were biting on that play action like he was going to kill them. And it really showed up on the back end. There was a few situations where they were in cover 3 and you can see whether it was Logan Ryan or Dory Jackson being late on their reactions, being late on their assignments. They had deep third, and they weren't getting back there fast enough, so that would really present Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins a chance to go deep. So those are things that need to be corrected. And I think, we'll see that, whether that's less LaShawn Sims on their key players, less Bryce McCain on their key players. I think you put Bryce McCain in the slot and really just say, okay, this guy is not our best slot corner, but there are situations where Logan Ryan needs to be covering our deep guy. And I think that was the case last week. He needs to be covering their deep outside receiver, and he wasn't. He was covering the slot. This week, you got Jarvis Landry, probably the best slot receiver in the league, and Logan Ryan should be covering him out of the slot. But on most weeks, you're going to be playing an outside receiver, and that's the guy that Logan Ryan needs to be covering. Any word on Mariota's severity? I talked about that a little earlier. I'll recap for folks that are just joining. Mariota's got a hamstring strain. It's minor. This week is in play. It's questionable. He's a guy who could play this week. It's going to be dependent on how he responds. What percentage is he in, and then ultimately it'll be decision by the coaching staff. If Mariota's at 78%, is 78% of Mariota better than Matt Castle? Yes. Is there a chance that he can get worse? Yes. How much of a chance? Do you want to risk that? Is it worth this game? These are all decisions Mariota, the training staff, and the coaching staff will have to weigh whether you push him. I think that if they deem him healthy enough to play, there's a good chance that you could see him in a pocket passer role, as a role where he's not having to design plays or design RPOs. He's just kind of standing in the pocket and doing more of a three-step drop. Of course, you'll see more DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry as they try to compensate for their injured quarterback. This is a game they really got to win. Their schedule isn't hard coming off, but you can't, with a tight AFC South, and you're looking at a guy and Deshaun Watson and the Texans that are heating up, you can't really afford to lose ground in this time and era. And, Andrew Luck is about to come back at some point. So this is a team that you were hoping was going to win a division. And right now they're 2-2 heading into a road game against Miami where they don't know who their quarterback is going to be. I think this is an important week. I think, if Mariota shows maybe he can be a limited participant Friday, or if he can at least get into his dropbacks without his throws being affected, I think they may be able to try to push him out there. And like I mentioned, put him in a 3-step, 5-step drop roll and kind of work your way from there. You're funny, Robert. What threat does Parker pose, and who do you feel like should be covering him? Devontae Parker is going to be an outside receiver. Like I mentioned, I think Logan Ryan should be covering Jarvis Landry. He's the Dolphins' best receiver, and you need to have your best corner on him. So I think you'll see a lot of Logan Ryan on Jarvis Landry, and you'll probably see Dory Jackson or LaShawn Sims on Devontae Parker. That's probably a matchup that still, leans, towards the Dolphins' way. But, hey, you've got to put your corners on somebody. So they've got 3 really good receivers. They got Kenny Stills out there as well. So who knows who Jay Cutler is going to be throwing the ball to this week, whether it's the blue jerseys or the aqua jerseys. But they've got a core of receivers that can threaten the Titans' cornerback crew. So how about Corey Davis and Sip and what's going on with Kevin Dodd? Corey Davis and Jonathan Cyprien are going to be out this week. They've got hamstrings. This is the 3rd straight week for Corey, 4th straight week for Cyprien. I guess they're pretty serious injuries, or at least they're trying to play them so they don't deal into November. So you're going to have to play without those guys again. You're going to need more from Eric Decker. I felt like he disappeared last week. I couldn't find him on film. He couldn't separate from guys. And Jonathan Cyprien, that goes into that secondary thing. You don't have one of your starters that you paid $25 million for over 4 years this offseason, and you can kind of tell when they're giving up deep bombs to Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins on a regular basis. I got you, Rob. Why do some people say cucumbers are better pickled? I don't know. I think that those people would be smart to say that cucumbers are better pickled. I don't really know who eats cucumbers just pure, unless they're like a salad topping. I don't really know that that's something that I would do, any sane person would do. Eat cucumbers just as a regular fruit or vegetable. I guess it's a vegetable, right? Hope that answers your question. Kevin Dodd, yeah, I think we're getting to the point where you start wondering, is Kevin Dodd going to show anything, or do you have to start using the B word, the bust word around Kevin Dodd? Second round pick last year. He's still slow off the ball. Honestly, you watch him in film and he looks hesitant. Is that foot injury still bothering him as far as a mental aspect? Probably. I don't think that it's bothering him as far as a health aspect. It's been a year and a couple surgeries, but it takes a while for you to mentally get past that sort of thing. He's got to trust it. Earlier this year he told me that he thought his career was going to be potentially over after that injury. So, it's clearly in his mind. He's got to be able to feel like he has that same burst. I would agree that he looked slow off the edge. And it's hard to play him. He's a guy who doesn't play special teams well. He's a guy who hasn't been fast off the edge, and this team really needs pass rush. And this would be a great time for Kevin Dodd to emerge and show himself as needing some play time on the field, because they couldn't get pass rush on Deshaun Watson last week, and they'll need some on Cutler this week, and he hasn't shown it. So I'm not ready to throw the book at him yet and say cut him or anything like that. He was a second-round pick last year, 33rd overall for a reason. They liked him. They thought they had something in him. So you got to keep going with him. Keep trying to build his confidence and put him into situations where he'll shine, and maybe he'll turn. Guys turn their career in their second and third year all the time. So maybe Kevin Dodd will be one of those guys. What adjustments does the Titans defense need to make coming off last week's loss against the Texans? Well, first they got to not give up 57 points. You give up 57 points, you're going to lose every single week. I don't care how good your offense is. And I think a big portion of that, you got a different quarterback this week. You won't have to worry about Jay Cutler's legs, but he's got a cannon of an arm. You never know if you're going to get bad Cutler or good Cutler. So I think this will be taking advantage of opportunity. Stop his mistakes. He's gonna throw some pickable balls to you at some point. You've got to make those interceptions. You've got to be able to get off the field on third down. And Jay Ajayi, he's the main cog in their offense. You've got to be able to stop them and keep them into long down situations, third and eights, second and 11s, situations where you can let your pass rushers, let Brian Rakbo and Jarrell Casey and Derek Morgan get after the quarterback and let Jay Cutler kind of throw it up in the air and see what happens. This is a team that's offense is really struggling, so you think they'll make things easy for them this week. They'll probably try to lean on Jay Ajayi a lot. They'll try to get a lot of short passes and force you to tackle, put Jarvis Landry and Kenny Stills in space and see if these guys can tackle. So you got to be disciplined. You got to know your assignments and not have as many missed assignments as they had last week. Granted, it's only the first quarter through. Do you think Sly is pulling his weight? Sly, I mean, just be honest. He hasn't had a great first 4 games in Titans. He hasn't played a lot. They've been in a lot of nickel coverage. I think, their run defense hasn't been terrible. It's hard to point him out when the whole defense has really been subpar, in my opinion. I think he's got to play better. I think a lot of guys have to play better. He's a nose tackle, so generally his responsibility is stopping the run. And their run defense hasn't been great, but their pass defense has been atrocious. So I think I would worry a little bit more about getting those back in guys, settled before I worry about, figuring out what's going on with Sly. Can we get Taywan more touches? I've been calling on it. I've been on get Taywan the ball boat for a month or so now. So they have had some opportunities to get him the ball, and they have at some times, but they haven't done it as consistently. They played 41 snaps last week. You can't get anybody the ball playing 41 snaps. So they've got to be on the field more. And Taewon is not just a gadget player. He doesn't have to just get reverses and little, fake screens and different things like that. He doesn't have to be a gadget player. He can run routes. I've seen him run great go routes, great slant routes. Put him in the slot, do different things. Get Eric Decker off the field for a few plays and get Taewon Taylor on there to get some reps. I'd love to see those sort of things, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few of those against Miami. Do you think DBs will actually start to follow the receivers, McCain or Hopkins? I hope so. I wrote a whole article about it. Hopefully LeBeau and the defense saw it. I mean, McCain versus Hopkins shouldn't happen as often as it happened Sunday. I really don't have a logical reason as why they saw that. Maybe it was just a game plan flaw, but you've got to be able to correct that, and hopefully they will this week. Will Trubisky ever throw on first down? He does sometimes. I mean, they've got to get in better rhythm on first down. We always talk about establishing the run because they're a run identity, but then we complain when they run the ball too much. It's got to be either or. I mean, everything looked good when it's working, and it doesn't look good when it's not working. I've been fine with the balance and the play calling for the most part. I just think these guys have not been in rhythm on offense. When Mariota's in there early on, he overthrew his receivers in that interception to start the game. That was on Marcus. And the next drive, Rashard Matthews slipped on a third down play that could have been a catch. These are rhythm plays that you've got to be able to get warmer. I'm not sure if that means they warm up a little earlier. They need more reps in practice. But it's a rhythm thing to me. And, they've looked better as the game has gone on. But Castle doesn't look good with any of the offense. So hopefully we don't have to watch that this week. Last week was rough to watch. I know watching Castle for 4 quarters would be rough to watch this week. After Sunday's blowout, still feeling really good about Sip and Davis. Come back, we'll get better. We need Kalen Reed. I think you might see Kalen Reed this week. He's been inactive. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him. You keep another DB active. They've got a lot of receivers. They play a lot of 3 wide coverage down in Miami. This could be a week to keep 5 up. Whether it's Ty Smith getting some more defensive opportunities, whether it's Curtis Riley or Kalen Reed, I think you'll see one of those 3 guys getting a little bit more reps. What was the difference in mobile quarterbacks? How did a rookie QB shred us, but Russell did it in garbage time? Can't watch games. Deshaun is a different type of quarterback than Russell. I mean, obviously, they're both mobile. They're both black. We kind of put those guys in boxes, but they're not the same guy. Deshaun's more of a one read at this point and take off type guy. I mean, he'll develop into a little bit more as he gets a little bit more experience, but right now he's more of a 1 or 2 read guy and gets ready to run, whereas Russell Wilson's always looking down the field to get a big play, and that's where he can beat you. So there was more discipline on the DBs to stay with their receivers, whereas this week it was more balance and contain in the run and him finding his receivers on crossing routes. So that's what really killed them this week, and honestly their game plan was a lot better against Russell. Jayon Brown will get his first picks, bet money. I'll remember that prediction, see if you're right. Was that Steven Johnson? We'll be back here next week. If he gets it, I'll call you out, give you a shout out. We can't tackle. Tackling, I mean, they weren't really in position to tackle. Everybody was running on the field wide open. Who do the Dolphins have that can cover Delanie Walker? I think it matters more from the Tennessee's perspective who is throwing the ball to Delanie Walker, because if it's Matt Castle, then it doesn't really matter who's covering, because you're going to have defenses really lined up to stop the run, and they're going to force you to make those tight throws and tight windows. I'm not sure Matt Castle at 35 can do that. If it's Marcus, then yeah, Delanie Walker's obviously still his number 1 or number 2 target, and I think he'll continue to be so. I'm not sure who Miami will put on him. I figure it'll be a safety of some sort. Maybe Rashad Jones will cover him. I don't imagine they try to put a linebacker on him. Delanie's too fast for that. So Delanie will be a big part of the offense. I talked to him after the game, and he said this is the chance where playmakers have to step up. And I think they do this week. I think they do, whether it's Matt Castle or Mariota. So I think I'm a little bit more worried about where the defense responds than whether the playmakers step up. I think it'll be a chance where they lean on the run game this week, and it may be an ugly game, but I think they'll get back to their identity. I love the DT's play, but neither Casey or Klug are playing as well as far in the past. What do you think? Casey hasn't really been active as a pass rusher. He's played good against the run. Klug, I haven't seen him flash much. He hasn't been as active. So, I would agree that they need more interior pass rush, and they need a little bit more from those guys. Play calling's a little predictable. We love to be Monday morning quarterbacks, but if they were throwing like double reverse screens with the receiver throwing a pass, we'd be like, what are they doing? This is not Madden. So at some point your play calling is going to be a little bit stale because this is the core of your offense. You've got to be able to run plays when the quarterback or when the defense knows that you're running plays. That's the status of a good offense. If you're saying, hey, it's 3rd and 3, we're going to run the ball in your mouth and you got to stop us, and they can't stop you. That's really what you want as offense, and I think that's what Tennessee is trying to establish. Yeah, I think they've been more conservative at times in play calling, but against Seattle, I thought their play calling was great. I thought that was their best week of play calling of the season. We saw a lot of different plays. We saw the Jonnu Smith fullback touchdown. We saw Delaney Walker on a sweep rushing for a touchdown. So I think there's been a lot of different nuanced plays. You can't have trick plays every week, but I think they've been pretty diverse. I remember them doing a 3 tight end set and going empty, and that's probably the first time I've seen that all year. So they've been pretty diverse, I'd say. Sometimes it's stale, sometimes there's 3 and outs, but that's every offense. They've been sort of middle of the pack with offense. So I think going forward, I'd like to see a little bit more dependency on DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry, but that also may be what you would call predictable. So, it just depends on how you look at it. Why won't they try Kevin Dodd at DN? I think he's too small to play 3-4 DN. When is Cyprien expected to return? Who knows? It's been 4 weeks. This will be the 4th week. You got to think he's back soon. Initially, when Malarkey talked about it, he said it was going to be a few weeks. This has been a few weeks. It's going on 4. I would think he would be back maybe next week against Indianapolis. Definitely got to be back by Cleveland, you would think. It's getting towards a month. So I see him walking around in the locker room. I know it's not, torn fully. So I think you can expect him back sooner than later. Same with Corey Davis. I've seen him around the locker room. I think they're just trying to make sure this thing doesn't linger into November. So I think he could be on the same page as Cyprien as far as a guy who could maybe come back on Monday Night Football against the Colts or the following week against the Browns. Does the coaching staff still have the locker room? Are you sensing everything? Yeah, I think they do. We like to overreact as far as fans and as far as media. They're 2-2, to be honest. Last week was a really bad loss. I don't know if they've suffered as bad of a loss in a while. I haven't seen a bad of a loss in a while. But it's just a loss. They're 2-2. They're still tied for the lead in the AFC South. I don't think the coaching staff's lost the locker room. They've still been pretty steady. If they lose this week in Miami, things might start to get ruffled, but it's the first quarter of the season. We've got a lot of football left to play. Nobody's losing the locker room yet. Did you touch on Sly? I did touch on Sly a little bit. I think Sly hasn't lived up to his contract so far. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've got of Sly, but I think it's hard to single him out as the reason why they haven't been playing as well defensively, because they haven't covered well. Their pass rush has been, rather docile, and their coaching scheme has been questionable. So there's been holes in every area. They've got to stop the run better. Their worst game was probably covering Marshawn, getting against Marshawn Lynch. They actually didn't do too bad against Lamar Miller. They had a couple beats against Deshaun Watson that hurt them, but for the most part, they've been sort of, average run-stopping team, which I don't think is a terrible notion against the nose tackle. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. If the game wasn't out of hand, do you think Marcus would have returned? I think they were playing it safe. I don't know. I heard some fans say that they didn't think Marcus was really hurt and they thought that it was just a score thing where they were doing it. I don't know. I can't say that for sure. I think he was really hurt. I don't think you play games with your quarterback. I mean, if you're going to take him out because of score, you just say that. I think he was legitimate, whether it was minor, whether he would return, if it was a true game. I don't know. I think that they said that this is our franchise quarterback and we don't want to throw him out there and have him tear his hamstring. And we're having this Facebook Live, having a memorial, talking about how the Titans season was promising, but it ended because Marcus Mariota tore his hamstring. So I think that's what they were trying to avoid, for better or for worse. So let's see. We play too much man coverage for these corners. I agree. You know, I came from Denver, where they played man coverage because they were better than the receivers. Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, Bradley Roby, that's probably the best trio of cornerbacks in the NFL. They played a ton of man coverage. They took pride in it. But Dick LeBeau has changed his scheme. I know for a while he was considered a zone blitz defensive coordinator. And now he's playing probably just as much, if not more, man than zone. And he doesn't have the talent to play it. You know, Logan Ryan is a pretty solid starting corner. But outside of that, you've got Adoree Jackson, McCain, and Sims, who are all probably role players on most teams. I wouldn't think they would be starters on most teams, all three of those guys. And you're trying to get by with a combination of them as your second and third corners. So, yeah, I think there should be more zone coverage. They played a good bit of zone, but the problem is if you're playing zone, you've got to know your responsibilities, and you've got to play the right discipline. You've got to be able to react well. And like I mentioned, I was watching the film yesterday, and there was at least two situations on cover 3 where both Logan Ryan and Adoree Jackson were slow to get back into their third. Kevin Byard didn't react well to his third as well, and that created big plays. So you can't play zone to your zone. And as young cornerbacks and safeties, they often get drawn in by the quarterback's eyes. And to see that against a rookie quarterback was concerning because there are more veteran quarterbacks that will be even better in that regard. So, you know, you've got to be able to play zone. Let's see. Ooh. Appreciate that. I need a show. I mean, they tell my bosses, hey, anything that, you know, if the check looking right, I'll talk about it. But no, it's been cool. I love covering a beat. So it's been fun. Am I settled into Nashville? Do you have a go-to spot for grub? I'll take any recommendations. I always say that. I've been to good food spots. I think I've checked out a bunch of barbecue spots. I'm from the South, so, you know, the barbecue spots and the fried chicken and the hot chicken, that's all in my avenue. Any recommendations, please send them on here. Send it on Messenger. I'd love to check it out. Go-to spots. For pizza, I love Slim and Husky's. That's been a real good spot for me. Martin's Barbecue is pretty good as well. I love their brisket burgers. I feel like this is a promo. I'm giving all these restaurants promos and they're not giving me a check. But Rippy's, their ribs are really good. I like Hattie B's hot chicken. I haven't had Prince's. I know that that's the original. I had their chicken strips. I had their tenders. I haven't had their, leg quarters or whole chickens or anything. I haven't been able to get in that line yet when I haven't been hungry. So I'll do that for sure. Pharmacy Burger. I live in East Nashville, so I've been to Pharmacy Burger, and that's pretty good as well. So yeah, any other recommendations, feel free to send them through. I love to check them out. I think I'm gonna close it up. Gotta get ready to head to practice shortly. And Eddie Taylor, I like Byard. I think that he needs to be a little bit more consistent, and I think he'll be a really good player. Feel like there's a lot of hamstring injuries. I think there is something to it. I don't know what it is. You've got 5 starters that have suffered hamstring injuries through 4 weeks of the season of different varieties. So training staff's got to figure that out. You can't have hamstring injuries flaring up. It's usually a hydration thing. It's usually a stretching thing. They talk about soft tissues all the time as far as a conditioning thing. I think these guys are well conditioned, but that is something to look into. So yeah, thanks guys. This was fun. Let me know as far as time. I did it a little later. I thought noon was a good time. I've been thinking about doing it Tuesday night, but this was a good, good turnout this week. So I may continue doing it this time. But hopefully, for you guys' sake, this will be a better week to watch the Titans. Thanks. Talk soon.